This is ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage. Connect with us at accnation.net. Listen to our podcast and streaming radio. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on your favorite social media outlet. Now, here's Will and Jim.
Welcome to ACC Nation. Our special guest is Jason Carmello of BigUnderdog.com. We're talking bracketology, men's basketball. This is a great time to do it. He's just out with his most recent bracket projecting college men's basketball, what it might look like as we get into March Madness. So, Jason, let's jump on some stuff here. Let's go with In the Hunt. First, we'll go with the teams that are in there. We've got three teams that are non-ACC, but the one that is an ACC team that's in the hunt, it's probably slipping through their fingers at the moment, is Wake Forest. Let's talk about why they're only in the hunt.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, Wake is one of those teams that they did spend some time kind of in the first four in the Dayton range over the last month. And it's really been the last, 4 games of their season that it's, like you said, it kind of slipped through their fingers. They were in a really good spot right up until, February 12th when they had Florida State on the ropes at home. And the game just got away from them. And that was a quad 3 loss to that Florida State team who's, obviously down this year. 72-70. And then from that point on, they picked up an away win at SNU. So they thought, okay, maybe they stabilized their season. They went to NC State and just really struggled against the Wolfpack, another quad 3 loss. And then they went home to Virginia, and Virginia had an offensive outburst. There you go, Will. And Virginia scores 83 points. And we talked about this a little bit, that Wake is a really solid defensive basketball team, but they're the 357th best team in the country at shooting the ball from three-point land, right? Out of 364 teams to 357th, they shoot at only 28%, which is such a low number for a team. What happens is when they get down late in games, they really struggle to make up ground. And they just don't have the offensive firepower to play catch-up. And so because of those 3 quad 3 losses that have all happened over the last couple of weeks, they're way back. They're in that kind of 10th, 12th range of teams still trying to get in. And I think they're going to have to make a very deep run, if not win the ACC tournament, to get in.
Okay. Jason, before we get into those next 3 teams that are non-ACC, I want to ask Will what his thoughts are on Wake Forest, because the last couple of seasons, Will, they have just been absolutely, it's almost like they come out of the barn on fire and then nothing. What's happening here?
Yeah, I think Jason laid out a lot of what's been ailing the D, especially this year. They're terrible offensively. You figure a team with Hunter Salas, who has been a consistent scorer in his couple of years there, you could rely on him to score a lot. And his 3-point shooting, he's sub 30%. And as Jason mentioned, as a team, they're almost at the very bottom of all of college basketball in shooting the 3. And I don't know, sometimes it feels like when their shots aren't falling, they don't have a backup plan. There are times when, like the Wake Forest game, not Wake Forest, but the Florida State game, Jason, they were up double digits in the second half of that game, and they blew it. Now, had they won that game, they may still not be in because of the subsequent losses, but they might be in that next 4 out or the first 4 out as a result of that. They just have these weird, like, end of season things that they just, for whatever the reason, they just tail off. And I don't know what it is. They did the same thing at the end of last season. They lost 3 out of 4 to close the season, and to some bad teams. I don't know if it's, I don't know what the plan, what the reasoning is, but this is, I mean, I think you'd be pretty upset if you're a Wake Forest fan if this is going to be the trend.
Not good. So we start off with Wake Forest in the hunt, and now we've got UC Irvine, San Francisco, and George Mason. So give us a little taste of each one of these teams, Jason, about what their strengths are and whether or not they're going to stay in the hunt or maybe move up or fall out.
Yeah, I mean the most interesting resume of those three remaining teams is UC Irvine. They're out in the Big West, and there's actually two fantastic teams out in the Big West this year, which is a very unusual. It's a conference that's always traditionally been a one bid league. UC San Diego is projected to win the league. They have a win at Utah State, and Utah State will be a Mountain West team that'll get an at-large spot. So they have kind of one of those really nice quad one road wins that can get a team with a very good record in the tournament. So if you see San Diego does take the automatic bid, can Irvine get in as an at large? And right now, I would say no. They do have, which is kind of incredible. They have the Anteaters have the seventh best defense in the country, which is crazy. A Big West team is that good defensively, very skilled, second best in 2-point field goal percentage. They really guard. They slow the pace down. They do a fantastic job. But even when you zoom out, and they've been really good. They're 25-5. They still have losses to Oregon State, Duquesne, UC Riverside. So like I think UC Irvine getting in is probably a stretch. Once you in this, if you go on the site, once you get to anything past the 6 teams or so in the hunt, it's hard for those other teams to get in. It would take some catastrophic stuff for Irvine to get in. George Mason was really they've played great in the A10 all year. It's been them and VCU. VCU, beat them the other night, and Mason's had a great year, but they just don't have the non-conference to get them in as well. So those teams on the periphery probably not. Wake would have the best chance of all of those to get in, but they just don't have the quality wins like we talked about.
In the first four out, you've got Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas, and Cincinnati. Some quick thoughts on those four.
Yeah, Nebraska. Nebraska was they were almost a lock just a week ago. I mean, they were in a spot where all they had to do was just not go completely sideways. They had a very favorable schedule. So on February 16th, Nebraska is rolling along. They had just won 5 out of 6. They're playing great basketball. Then they go to Penn State and they lose by almost 20. Then they come home. They lost to Michigan 49-46, which that was a squirrely defensive-minded game. So, okay, even if that happens, they have 3 games remaining. Minnesota at home, at Ohio State, and Iowa at home. You just get the 2 home games and you get in. They lost at home to Minnesota, who has been playing much better, but still. So now they're at 17-12, and now they got to do a lot of work to get in. Even with that said, they still have wins against Oregon, Illinois, Ohio State, UCLA. So when we talk about these SMUs and Wakes, if you're an optimistic ACC fan, say, well, like maybe our team should get in. These Big Ten teams, Ohio State, Nebraska, they have so many losses. Yes, but they beat somebody. Like they beat some teams that are going to be at large teams. And that's been the issue with the ACC teams. They just don't have the quality wins because in part the ACC is down itself. So Nebraska has went sideways. A quick bit on Oklahoma. Oklahoma started the season 13-0. They went to the Bahamas. They won that tournament. They were playing fantastic. And then all of a sudden they had to play the SEC games. And it has gone sideways quick. It's an Oklahoma team that right now is 4-12 in the league. And while the conference record is theoretically not on a team sheet, if they lose another game, we're talking about a team that went 5-13 in the league and has won 4 times since we've turned the calendar, and they're going to get an at-large bid. Like that's kind of where we are with the ball.
Next 4 out, right at the very top, and I'm telling you, this is like watching a train wreck in slow motion. I don't know any other way to put it because, quite honestly, I guess if I were a Tar Heel fan, do or die, you stick with your team and everything. But my God, you guys are horrible, and there's just no consistency. Let's talk about UNC.
Yeah, so the Tar Heels, computers think Carolina's good, right? Even their net for being 1-10 in quad 1 games. So again, for the listeners, quad 1 are the top tier games you play. there's 2, 3, and 4. 4 being kind of the weakest teams that you could play on your schedule. Mm-hmm. And they're 1-10 against the quad one games, and the one win was a 76-74 win in the CBS Classic against UCLA back in December. That's it. But 10 losses against them. The good news for Carolina is they're 5-0 in quad two games, but none of those teams are going to make the tournament. They do. To me, the game that wrecked their whole season was the 72-71 loss to Stanford at home. So what Carolina was doing was saying, listen, we're not doing a good job this year of beating really good teams, but we don't have any bad losses. So that's what's going to get us in. Well, then you can't lose to Stanford at home this year, right? And so that, to me, is what holds them out. I think a lot of, you've had lots of chances and you haven't cashed in. Yes, you have the fifth best on conference schedule, so kudos to them for playing the games, but you got to win some of them. Again, you're dealing with Nebraskas and Oklahomas and Ohio States that have 5 or 6 quad one wins, and you got 1. So while some people prescribe to, if Carolina beats Duke, that they're going to be in the tournament, I do not subscribe to that. I do not. There's too many teams with too many other good wins. And yes, I understand they have more losses, but they've played a harder schedule overall. I think Carolina needs to beat Duke, and then they need to keep winning. That's not going to be enough. They're going to need multiple wins plus the Duke win, maybe even a trip to the ACC finals to get in the tournament. If you're a Carolina fan, you start with having to win that game, but that is not going to be enough to get you in.
Boy, I agree with that. I want to see what Will's thinking here about North Carolina, because I know that, we sit back and we look at this, Will, and it's like we're scratching our heads and we're wondering whether, Hubert's going to even be there next year. There's so many questions.
Yeah, and Hubert got that extension, so it seems like he's going to be back next year. I think there might be some underlying numbers to say this is more to lower the buyout. Who knows? And I think a lot of the reason people are keeping North Carolina, around the bubble is, hey, they've won 5 in a row, and they're looking good, 6 and 7. But okay, let's look at these 5 wins: Syracuse, North Carolina State, Virginia, Florida State, and Miami. Okay. 4 of those 5 are in the bottom 6 of my power rankings, which will be up on ACC Nation Radio on Monday, and Florida State, who I think I have right around 9 or 10 in the ACC. Yeah, that's more. It's quantity, but it's not quality, and I don't see how they're going to beat Duke. I know they're going to host it, and Duke. The Duke game in Durham, that game was nowhere near as close as the final score indicated. They were never close in that game, and I don't see any reason to believe otherwise against it. And the only reason Carolina might win is, what if this injury with Cooper Flaggy suffered against FSU last night ends up being more of a serious thing? I don't think it is, but even still, I just don't try. And I agree with Jason, the fact that just beating Duke alone isn't going to cut it. They got to do more.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Villanova, then TCU and Colorado State. Colorado State, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's the Mountain West teams, and this happens every year. You usually get a Mountain West team in Dayton, whether it's a Boise or Colorado State. They usually kind of get in there, and some of it's just straight math. The committee has an unwritten rule that they expect teams to be 4 games over 500. It's this kind of unwritten, unspoken thing, but they in 18 and 14 works, but a 17 and 14 or an 18 and 15 rarely gets in. Now Michigan got in 2022 with a 17 and 14, but their non-conference was in the single digits, and their strength of schedule was single digits as well. And it's 5 or 6 quad one wins, but they expect that. So the problem is this. The Texases of the world, right? Like these teams, Ohio State, they're accruing all of these losses. And so when that number dips below 4 games over 500, that's when you see these Mountain West teams that are 20 and 8, 21 and 7, 19 and 11. Like these records start to look pretty good. and the Mountain West has enough quality teams. They're going to have a similar number of teams at large wise than the ACC, right? You're going to get that across the board. And when you look at a team like that, they end up getting one of those Dayton spots because their schedule is so attractive, and they have similar type quad one wins as well.
Well, it's all yours, buddy.
There is an ACC team notably absent from your list, and that is SMU. And I feel like you're the only bracketologist that I have seen that doesn't have him in the field, and I'm going to applaud you for that. Why is that? They have two wins against teams inside the top 100 of the net. Pitt, who has completely fallen off the face of the earth, and Stanford, who, even though they have a 19-win season currently, for some reason the computers hate them. Probably because they lost by double digits to Cal Poly at home.
The SMU, Will, to your point, the SMU phenomenon this year has been something that, as someone that does this day in and day out, I cannot wrap my mind around. The ESPN projected bracket heading into the weekend had SMU as the sixth team out. So Wake was 5, and SMU was the sixth team out.
But let me stop you right there. That's Joe Lunardi.
Yes,
and that says everything right there. Okay. Now,
ESPN analytics are just flawed in general, but yes, go ahead.
Lunardi is the godfather of this, so I'm not here to criticize other people's work. I am here to say this. It is March. And if you play in a major conference and you don't have a win over a team in the field, then get out of here. Get out of here. Go play in the Crown or the NIT, enjoy the trip, have a good run, get ready for next year, buy some good players next year. But this is not a conversation about making the tournament. Not only that, I'm going to double down why SMU could never make the tournament in any of these scenarios. Their non-conference strength of schedule is 272nd. So they didn't even try to play people. So I just don't understand the math. I understand that 2 or 3 computers out here in this world believe that they're a good team, but they've demonstrated none of it. And they had these games at home. They got the schedule with Duke at home, Clemson at home, Louisville at home. Heck, they had Mississippi State at home in the non-con. They lost all the games. That's fine. If you lose all of those games, then you don't make the tournament, especially with where the ACC is this year. And so that's one that I haven't understood. I don't understand. I don't want to upset SMU fans, but I do want to speak the truth to them that there is really not a path for them to make the tournament other than to win the ACC tournament. And what kind of is a little unsettling for me is, last week when they're playing, when they play some of these important games, they talk about, well, if they beat, was when they were playing the Clemson game. If they beat Clemson at home, then they're going to be placed in. No, they're still 3 wins away from getting in the tournament. So just be careful with some of these projections. Again, who did you beat, and what's your non-conference strength of schedule? You have to keep an eye on both of those things, because that's what the committee does. The committee understands that these games are 1 out of 30-some games. And so the swing of the pendulum doesn't move that much. At this time of year, teams very rarely move around more than 1 or 2 seeds from where they are now. They just don't, because most of the hay is in the barn at this point.
All right, let's go towards the front of the bracket. And I remember when we had you back on in January, we were talking about Houston, and we're like, hey, you have them on the 5 line, but it was more of just due to lack of substance with their schedule. And you said, okay, once they get into Big 12 play, that will change. Lo and behold, here we are, 17-1 in the Big 12, and you currently have them as the 3rd number 1 seed. So I am very interested, because I thought Houston was going to make the Final Four last year, but then when Shed got hurt in the Sweet 16, or the Elite 8 game, a Sweet 16 game, that it ruined everything. But they have everything there to get back this year with this Cougar team.
Yeah, Houston is even better than they were last year, and that's saying something. I mean, That's an absurd thing to say for a team that finished 32-5. So last year, Houston, and they have some of the same players. Obviously, they've adjusted the roster a little bit, losing Chet. But last year, they were 133rd in the country in 3-point shooting and 228th in 2-point shooting. Now, they didn't never turn the ball over, and they were one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. So that's how they scored. They threw the ball at the rim, they got it, they put it back in through sheer grit. This year, they're the third best 3-point shooting team in the country. That is dangerous. That is dangerous when you pair the third best 3-point shooting team in the country with the third best defense in the country. Like, Houston usually doesn't shoot from the perimeter this well, and they do. Now, that can be fickle. So you say, well, they're relying on the three. Not really, because they're 12th best in offensive rebounding. So even if they miss, they're probably going to grab and put it in. They, like you said, Will, they didn't have the quality. They played a good non-conference schedule, but they struggled in the tournament in Vegas that they participated in the non-con. They struggled in that, losing to San Diego State, Bama. But again, in the Big 12, their only loss was a heck of a game to Texas Tech at home. They've really tightened up their defense. They've gotten everything organized, and offensively, they score the ball really well.
I'm very interested in this battle for the fourth number one seed. Right now, you have Tennessee. The Vols have been, they've done everything it's basically between them and Florida and obviously Alabama. It's going to really come down to the SEC tournament. It feels like who gets that number one seed, but specifically on Tennessee, this is the number one defensive team in the country. Have won four in a row. Obviously, just had a great win over Alabama at the buzzer on Saturday. What can you tell us about the Vols?
But what's crazy is that when you think of coaches, and a lot of teams are going more towards kind of the younger coach, right? Shire, like all these coaches that understand the portal and they understand NIL, and talk about all these coaches that are getting out of the game because of the shifting landscape of how to pay players and the transfer portal. And then somehow Rick Barnes has figured this out. It's crazy. So Tennessee has been consistently excellent over the last 8 to 10 years under Rick Barnes, right? People thought, if things had passed him by at the end of the Texas route. Tennessee gets a wonderful coach. He's turned the program into an excellent program. So last year, let's not forget, he found Dalton Connect from Northern Colorado as a first team, and then became first team All-American, right? And obviously he plays for Lakers now. Well, he tried to, still plays for Lakers. Then you've got this year Chaz Lanier, and it has been remarkable at the talent that he pulls together. And then he takes all of these players, and some of these guys are just scorers, and they all buy in to play defense. As you said, Will, the best defensive team in the country. I've got Tennessee in there again. They've got the wins over Florida. They got the wins over Bama. So right now they got the tiebreaker. It's like you said, Will, it's probably going to come down to when they play each other in the 2-3 game of the SEC. Maybe that'll flip it one way or the other. So for now, it's Tennessee. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I think then it's Alabama. Then Florida's a little bit behind it. Florida, they didn't rack up the quality wins in the non-conference that Tennessee did. So I think Florida's a little bit behind those two teams. I think it's going to come down to Bama or Tennessee taking that last the one seeds. Because Auburn could lose out. They'll still be the one overall. Then Duke, then Houston. Houston and Duke could flip flop. But it's really those other SEC teams vying for the last one seed.
There's a team on the two line that I'm very intrigued by in terms of the modern age of college basketball and the reliance of the three-pointer and their just inability to shoot threes.
Yeah.
Michigan State,
Yeah.
a team, and they're 347th shooting the ball. They're under 30% as a team, yet they're 24-5. Just beat Maryland on a miracle beyond half court buzzer beater. Beat a good Wisconsin team who you also still have on the two line. It feels like there's all the ingredients are there for another Izzo and March type run.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, when you watch Michigan State earlier in the year, you could tell that they played hard, but they were lacking offensive firepower at all. And Jace Richardson, right, Jason's kid who played there under Izzo, has kind of blossomed into one of the best and most dynamic players in the Big Ten. Like you said, they can't shoot the ball from the perimeter. So when they get any help from the perimeter, it makes them very, very dangerous. They're one of the very best offensive rebounding teams in the country. So they just kill you on the glass. It's interesting when at Big Ten Media Day went up there and you got to listen to Izzo talk about his team a little bit, and he said kind of very quietly in kind of the side sessions, he said quietly, they just don't have to deal with all the other stuff this year. They just kind of have a ball team. And when you hear that, you realize that it's greater than the sum of the parts. This team, talent-wise, is probably on the bottom end of the last decade for him. But they play together, they buy in, and boy, do they play hard. And so what you're seeing is they're going through the date. They got through kind of the February grind because they're playing harder than everybody else. When other teams aren't quite there on a Tuesday night on a 9 p.m. tip in the Big Ten, they're ready to go. And they're out working people, and they're just smashing them early in the game, and they're running away with it.
There's another team similar to this, a seed below them, St. John's, 338th in three-point percentage.
Yeah.
But they're the number 2 defense in the country. So take that away. And this is, Rick Pitino's, doing one of his best coaching jobs, maybe of his entire career, taking a team that, just missed the tournament last year, and they're currently on the 3 line. What can you tell us about St. John's?
So I agree. This is one of it's hard to say, right? It's one of Pitino's best coaching jobs. You can say that almost every year of his career. What's interesting about the transfer portal, and Pitino's been open about this. Kadary Richmond was a fantastic basketball player at Seton Hall. He was a really good player. Seton Hall got on the doorstep and make the tournament. And Pitino's open about it. They just went and bought him. They bought him. And when you take intra-conference really good players and you add in Rick Pitino to teach a guard even more, they become the floor general that's really galvanized the roster. St. John's was one of the first teams left out this year. That won't be the case. St. John's, like you said, they cannot shoot the ball at all from the perimeter. But again, just like Izzo, they play really, really hard. That'd be a wonderful Elite Eight matchup, by the way, Michigan State, St. John's. St. John's, though, I will say this. It's a hard team to figure out where they're going to end up in the tournament. So they're 26-4. They're in the Big East. They are the talk of the town right now. So like, okay, that's amazing. But they only have 3 quad 1 wins. And one of those is against a Xavier team that's very, very much on the bubble. They won at Connecticut. They beat Marquette at home, then at Xavier. Their other wins of the tournament teams are home games against Connecticut, Creighton, New Mexico, and then that's about it. And so while everything about it is kind of a headlines and amazing, and it is, the resume, they're going to have to play well in the Big East tournament to hold on to a 3 seed. It's going to be kind of one of those where you could see them slipping down to a 4. And you're like, well, what happened there? Look at their schedule. It's not as strong. The non-conference really didn't provide anything of substance from a win perspective other than when he beat his son at New Mexico.
Jim?
I'm going to go down a list of teams here, and I want you to basically just stop on the one or several who you think may go further than that first game and could pose a threat in this tournament.
Rapid fire. Let's do
it. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I'm going to start with Southern.
Politely no.
American.
Politely no.
Marist.
Very good record this year, but their strength of schedule has been horrific. I'm going to go no.
Omaha.
No.
Southeast Missouri State.
Really good lately, but no. I'll be quick with those. When you go into the 16s and 15s, I think maybe Northern Colorado could win in the 15 seed. I think there are some very dangerous teams in the 14 seed. Chattanooga is a wonderful basketball program. James Madison beat Wisconsin last year. I think 16 and 15s this year. I don't see an upset coming this year. not only between what I'm seeing with those, but also based on the quality of the 1 and 2 seeds. Sometimes you get a 2 seed that's a little on the back end that's a little iffy. I mean, Michigan State right now is fantastic. So I'm going to go with kind of the James Madison, Utah Valley, Chattanooga in the 14 range.
Okay, let's go up to the next list. Akron, Lipscomb, High Point, Liberty.
Yeah, Akron's. I'll go Akron. MAC schools have historically been very good in the tournament. Um, Akron has a top. Akron is a very good shooting team, and that can keep game pressure on it. And they're just good enough defensively to hang in there. So I'll go with Akron. They played some teams tough in the non-con, and they've been running through the MAC. And the MAC every couple of years wins a game early in the tournament. So I'll go Akron.
Okay. Couple of teams here that have moved up. Boise State, Xavier, UC San Diego, McNeese, and Yale.
Yeah, Yale is in the Ivy League. Sometimes you get these teams, and you saw this with Princeton 2 years ago that made the Sweet 16. They beat two Tigers. They beat Missouri in round one. Yale is very dynamic offensively. They shoot almost 40% from three. They never turn the ball over, and they're better defensively than most Ivy League teams. They're a little more athletic. They're a little better defensively. So Yale can be very, very dangerous and probably in that 12-5 range. So I would take Yale there. Boise every single year just keeps getting better. I think very quietly, Leon Rice is one of the best coaches in the country. And this is why you see Boise State every couple of years, they end up in Dayton playing in that year. Like, whoa, where's this team come from? They just kind of get better each year. So I like Yale and Boise.
Okay. I'm going to skip over the next couple, and because I'm going to deliver unto Will the next ACC team and let him go through the next couple of ACC teams that are in your projections. But I want to remind everybody, if you want to see this most recent iteration of Jason's projected bracket, go to big-underdog.com. That's big-underdog.com. Make sure that you follow him. He has a lot more accurate information than the aforementioned person that I will not mention again. Just because it's not worth mentioning. Anyway, Will, it's all yours.
All right, before we get to the ACC team, there's another team I wanted you to bring up with us, Jason. A team that has had I would say one of the biggest turnarounds in college basketball from last season to this season. The Missouri Tigers last season went winless in the SEC. They are now on the 4 line. What Dennis Gates has done, I think, is just unbelievable. Getting a team from, like I said, from going an 0 for last year to that high up on the 4 line this year.
Yeah, really good point, Will. Missouri was 0-19 in any SEC game last year. That's incredible, right? Like, and they returned 4 starters this year. 4 starters. So 80% of those players came back and said, let's try this again. Let's do it. And they came back, and now they have the 5th best offense in the country. So last year it was 136, and from a 3-point shooting percentage, 277. Now they came back in 4 out of 5. They're the 22nd best. They went 200 spots up in 3-point shooting. Like, that's crazy. 4 out of 5. So they've done a really good job of running their offensive sets in the SEC. And the SEC this year might be historically the greatest conference of all time, which is crazy. So that means Dennis Gates can really coach, right? Like, he kind of circled the wagons. And to your point, Will, people in the coaching circles have been very complimentary of him. He was at Cleveland State, took the job at Missouri. He can really galvanize a roster, and to hang with it and keep 80% of your starters, and now to be on the precipice of a protected seed in the top 4, really, really good.
On the 5 line, as we go back to the ACC for a moment, Clemson, a team that I was never big on Brad Brownell. I just didn't get it with him. And people talked about that team in the 2018 tournament. I think made the Sweet 16, but that thing was. We're going to look at that 2018 tournament. You know, it was one of the weirdest ever
Yeah.
from, you know, obviously with, you know, UMBC and whatnot. But I feel like I think this team, I think Brad Brownell, since the NIL period has kicked in, has really done a great job of getting talent in there, developing them, and honestly, I think they're going to kick themselves for losing in triple overtime to Georgia Tech because they could have easily won the ACC with that if
Yeah.
they won that game this year.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson's had just a fantastic year. I mean, 24-5. All their metrics are really good. Their non-conference strength schedules, 79. So they check all the boxes. It's a resume, just strictly resume wise, it's a resume that sounds better than it is. And so you get some pushback from some Clemson fans to say, well, like, why aren't we even better? Like, why aren't we in the 3-4 seed conversation? And the answer is this: there isn't the quantity of really good wins. And their best wins all took place at home. So they beat Duke and Kentucky, and those are wonderful wins, but those were at home. Yes, they've got an 8-3 road record, but again, a lot of that's beating up on the bottom side of the ACC. And then, like you said, they had that quad 3 loss to Georgia Tech. So they have a little bit of a limited ceiling because they only have 4 quad 1 wins and they've got a quad 3 loss. And so while there's probably a path to a 4 seed, that's probably where they're going to max out at. I think they're going to kind of settle in on the back of the 4, the front of the 5 is probably where Clemson ends up. But I mean, listen, regardless, that's a wonderful season, right? I mean, that's a very quality seed. It's a wonderful season, and they're another team that we talk about. These teams make incredible strides in shooting. You got to make shots. Clemson from the 3-point range last year was 119th. This year, they're 12th. You got to make shots. They're making shots at a higher rate. They've kind of reconstructed the roster a little bit around Shufflin, who's he's one of my favorite players in college basketball. He just plays harder than everybody else, and they're making shots this year, and that's why they've been consistent with winning, especially in the ACC.
I laugh because Shefflin does not look like a basketball
He's
player, but
wonderful.
he is
He's
he's going to end up on an all ACC team here, you know, in a week or so. But yeah, what they've done, I think, yeah, it's just a great story. And
he's gotten better every year. I went back
Mhm.
and looked at his statistics. I tweeted this a little bit ago. Like, he literally has increased in points, rebounds, assists, like blocks every single thing category every year, and he's like the perfect college basketball player. He plays hard, stayed with the team, got better, stuck it out, made a tournament run, and now he gets to be the captain of a really good roster. I mean, so all this transfer portal and all these people moving around, there's still some of these really wonderful stories, and he's absolutely one of them.
Yep, I was just going to make that point. If you're a fan of the old school player, Shefflin
Yep.
is a player you should follow. But I'm interested because going down a seed, okay, this is the worst Kansas team in quite some time. Yet some of their they're a better defensive team than they were last year, and their offense is similar. But what's with them this year? They're to be so far down on the 6 line.
Yeah. So when you construct a roster, right? I think this is one of those times where I truly believe that metrics can play tricks on people. Listen, I love them. I love going through them. I think they really they ground information and they provide insight to not only selection committee, but kind of all of us that evaluate teams. But when you watch Kansas play, there are games that they really play excellent defensively, and then there are other games where they're centered around Hunter Dickinson, who is he's an offensive basketball player, right? And some of these other guys that are more focused on scoring, that they are not nearly the sixth best defensive team in the country, and that's what the metrics say. In some games, they ramp up, and they did that against lesser opponents early in the year. When you get in a conference play, at times their defense has really struggled. I don't think that they have been the most, I'll put it politely, they have not been the most motivated team in the country when you watch them play. And some of that's the center, the aforementioned center.
Mhm.
Um, they are not galvanized. So early in the year, if you watch a team like Indiana, who had all these wonderful pieces, you watch Indiana player, like, these people, they don't want to play with each other. or like I don't care who the coach is, like the players on the court and all this talent, all this money they spent, they are not playing together. Indiana has kind of galvanized under Woodson resigned, and they've galvanized. And you've seen at times Kansas play together, and at times they are individual players just trying to get buckets, and they haven't played well as a team. But you can only move them down the seed line so low because when you beat Michigan State, when you beat Duke, when you have a winning record in the Big 12, like you're going to bottom out at a 6 seed. Like there's nowhere else to go. No one has wins like that other than a team like Kentucky, Tennessee, and those really high end SEC teams. So it is Self has never. This is a crazy stat. Self has never had a seed worse than a 4 seed in his 20 years at Kansas. So while we're hard on them this year, and we're talking a bit down for Kansas fans and living in Kansas City, there's many of them around. Like Self gets the benefit of the doubt here. And at their worst, if they're a 6 seed, there's a lot of Power 5 coaches that would sign up in blood for a 6 seed right now to keep their job or even get an extension. So Kansas is very talented. There's no reason they can't make a Sweet 16 or Elite 8. Like there's just mathematically no reason that the preseason number one, there's plenty of good players. Also, I'll say this on the last point on Kansas, and this could go for really some of these kind of more offensive focused teams that kind of wiggling, kind of rambling through the conference season. Some of these guys that have been here for 5 years, they get bored. They're bored. Like I know they're getting paid, but they're not playing hard on a Tuesday night in Waco. Like they may not be playing that hard, but they're going to play hard in March. And so you don't know the like Kansas could go full throttle and we could have a conversation in a month or so and look back and say, well, where did this come from? Well, it was there in the beginning because they beat Michigan State and they beat Duke. Again, a young Duke team early in the year, but they beat Duke and Michigan State on neutral courts. And so the firepower is there. The drive and effort hasn't been there, but it could be. So Kansas, listen, if you sign up and you're a 3 seed, you got to get Kansas in round 2. Good luck, because that's going to be a tough draw, but that's about where Kansas should be seated.
So the other ACC team you have in your bracket is Louisville, who is on the 7 line, and I am surprised they're that low. They don't have any quad 3 losses. They're only one of 3 teams in the ACC that don't have a loss outside of the first 2 quadrants, 23-6, and future, ACC Coach of the Year Pat Kelsey's done an amazing job turning this program from the hole that Kenny Payne dug it in. But I feel like I guess if there's one C or team seed line, I kind of like am questioning on this thing, it's Louisville. So can you explain to me why Louisville's on the 7 line?
I keep trying to move them up because they keep winning, but the problem is, and we talked about this last time we spoke. Once they played the first couple of games in Duke in the ACC, they didn't have any quad 1 games the rest of the year. And so these other teams keep acquiring really good wins, and Louisville's doing wonderful. They keep winning, but there's nothing that's vaulting them forward. Now you say, well, these other teams are losing. Yes, but historically the committee said, who did you beat? And there's just not a ton of depth there. Of course, there's Clemson. Everybody keeps getting credit for all these SMU wins. Sure, we'll throw that in there, right? But there's just not the depth and quality of their wins to push them forward. They're one of those teams, I believe that like they're ready for the ACC tournament in a sense of like, let's get a couple more good wins. And if they could get a couple neutral court, top 50 wins on that, get to the finals of the ACC, could look back and they could probably vault into that 5 seed range. Like there's room for growth. They just need a little bit more to get ahead of a Marquette, to get ahead of a UCLA. Some of these UCLA teams have, like UCLA's got 7 quad 1 wins. Louisville's got half of that. So they just got to be careful with the projection because they just don't have the depth of wins. And a lot of that's not their fault. The ACC schedule that they were given a low-end ACC schedule, right? Because of their record last year. And in some ways, they're racking up wins, and that's great. But in other ways, it's hurting their seed.
Jim?
ACC tournament time is going to be extremely important to a lot of these teams. We'll see what some of these folks can pull. They can pull a rabbit out of their hats. Now I ask you this every time that we talk about your bracket, but who do you see as a team that definitely could nab a national championship?
When
I'm writing this down for my bracket, by the way.
all right, put it in. Texas Tech.
Texas?
I think Texas Tech is fantastic. When they are healthy, they're experienced, they're tough as nails. They can really score. Anybody that spent a few moments watching them play at Houston, JT Toppin was ejected for one of the most criminal, ridiculous calls I've ever seen. He was kind of passing the ball and his feet went up, and he accidentally kicked a Houston player. This is in the first 4 minutes of the game. Toppin's their best player, transferred from New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So he got ejected. Their best player gets ejected 4 minutes into Houston. It's a Saturday night game in Houston. Houston is all ramped up. You think at this moment, like, Tech's going to get killed. They won in overtime. So to do that without your best player, they've got really good quality players. McCaslin's a very good coach, and they've got kind of a sturdiness about their roster. They can shoot from the perimeter. They're really tough. I'd go kind of and they've kind of been below the radar because their non-conference strength of schedule is very weak. So they didn't do anything in the non-conference. They lost to St. Joseph's early when they really weren't guarding. So Tech's kind of under the radar. I think they could make a really good run.
I think that you told me Texas Tech the last time I asked you this question.
Yeah. So. They're so well coached. You know, that if you win at Houston and at the Fog at Kansas in the same year, that means you are mentally and physically tough, right? Like you've got some grown men on that roster that have been through it and are ready to go. And that doesn't always translate, but they absolutely are a Final Four caliber team. You know, some of the podcasts and things, you know, a lot of people bring up. I just want to kind of make sure we talk about this. A lot of people bring up Purdue, and of all the coaches that I've been fortunate to spend time around, Matt Painter's the best, right? Like we talked about, like Matt Painter gets it. The issue at Purdue is this year they don't have the perimeter defense. Everybody talked about how good Zach Edey was last year offensively. He's actually stabilized their defense. And so you talked about teams where they're seeded and making a run. I think Texas Tech's that. I look at a team where Purdue is seeded and I have major concerns because they're in the bottom 10% in field goal percentage defense since the calendar flipped over to 2025. So while Purdue has these kind of quality wins that they stacked up early, they're one of those teams that, yes, they're going to be a 4 or 5 seed, but no, I don't think Purdue can make a Final Four this year. And Braden Smith's fantastic. He's one of the best passers I've ever seen. Like he's worth the admission. And Kaufman-Wren's fantastic as well, but it's kind of 2 versus 5 for them most nights. Lawyer's a pretty good shooter, but they're giving up so much defensively to play offense that Purdue makes me very nervous.
For those of you who are getting ready to put pen to paper and do your bracket, here's where you start. big-underdog.com. Jason Carmello is our guest talking about his projections for where teams are going to be in the bracket for March Madness. And it's coming so quickly, man. It's like you can just tell everybody we talk to, including Jason, is just an excitement is starting to build. You feel that tournament time coming our way. I think it's going to be an interesting year. There's an awful lot of talent there. SEC could be running away with this thing. They've got an awful lot of great teams there, but then you've got teams like Houston and Duke and a lot of others who can sneak up and bite you when you are least expecting it. So we'll see how that all plays out. Hope to get you back on another time before we delve into this complete loss of our minds for a couple of weeks, because that's what's going to happen. You know, everybody's going to roll out as the old schoolers in the ACC will absolutely recognize this. You go to school They roll the TV out,
Yeah.
they put it in your classroom, and that's what you're going to be watching. You're not learning history, math, anything else. You're watching the ACC tournament.
Give me that 8-9 ACC game right in the afternoon to get all the conference games started. Was an ingrained part of my childhood. I'm with you in Greensboro. When you talk about the ACC tournament, I want to make sure we hit on this before we jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to look at like how the bracket might shape out. I think Pitt wants to Pitt's been losing for months now. Like, take a couple more losses and make sure you get out of the 8-9 game. Like, just get out of there. Like, stay away from Duke and get Pitt to like the bottom half of the bracket and then see what happens. So, in prepping and looking at this, kind of look at dark horses, and Pitt's season doesn't make any sense to me. Like, when you watch them play, and they've just been finding ways to lose. And I'm not listen, winning 3, 4, 5 games is a lot for these kids, right? Like, that's a lot. But if you look at a dark horse, I think, obviously Wake and SMU will probably get to play each other in 4 or 5 games. So one of those teams will get a shot at Duke, and then, from there, who knows? But like maybe Pitt kind of put some things back together. They've got guards. Guards usually win in March. That would be, if I got to pick someone like with a double-digit seed in the ACC, give me Pitt, and then we'll see what happens.
Interesting. So everybody listening?
Yeah, they'll lose the first round, but it's worth a shot.
Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting premise. I love that. It's, everybody loves that Cinderella story, so we'll go with there. Jason,
we had one last year.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I mean, right? You never know.
You never know. Exactly. Jason, appreciate you dropping by and talking to us. And like I said, we're going to try to sneak you in before everything just totally unleashes and goes crazy. Thanks a lot for joining us and sharing what's going on at bigunderdog.com.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
ACC Nation, your source for ACC sports coverage with Will and Jim. Be sure to subscribe, and follow us on our podcast, streaming radio, and YouTube. Connect with us on Blue Sky, Reddit, Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn.